Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Fujifilm X-T5. X-T5 brings the X-T line up to date by utilizing the new X-Trans5 HR sensor and X-Processor 5. It also fixes some of the issues of the X-T4 and adds more features associated with the new 5th generation platform. Despite that, Fujifilm is offering the X-T5 at a very competitive price point, especially by 2023 standards. In this video, we will take a look at the performance and the feature set of the X-T5, and I will try to help you decide whether you should consider getting one. X-T cameras used to be in somewhat awkward situation where they were experience-oriented vintage-style cameras with old-school controls, but they also had to compete with mainstream hybrid DSLMs. That is no longer the case because Fujifilm makes two up-to-date pragmatic X-H line cameras that are now competing with A7, Z6 or S5 lines. That means that the X-T5 has more freedom to focus on being an experience-oriented stylish DSLM. Besides that, it is a less hybrid camera focused more on photography, which is in my opinion a good choice for the same reasons. X-T5 is actually a little bit smaller than the X-T4. It is narrower by about half a centimeter and lighter by 50 grams. That doesn't sound like much, but it actually feels a little bit more compact. The build quality is also better in my opinion because the weakest part of the X-T4 was the rotating screen, which has been replaced by the good old three-way tilting screen that we know from the X-T3. X-T5 is weather sealed, so it should be able to withstand a reasonable amount of bad weather. I think that the style will be one of the main selling points of the X-T5, especially after the X100V social media boost. Probably the most significant upgrade of the X-T5 is the new sensor and processor. It uses the new X-Trans5 HR 40MP backside illuminated sensor. It is paired with X-Processor 5 with twice as much performance in comparison to X-Processor 4. I have already tested this combination in XH2, so there isn't much new that I can tell you about it. Regarding the resolution, I am now even more convinced that 40MP on APS-C makes sense. I have tested the new Viltrox AF Pro 75mm f1.2xf, and I can say that this is another X-mount lens that can definitely fully match this kind of pixel density. There definitely is a visible difference between the X-Trans4 and 5. X-Trans5 definitely captures more detail on my testing scene. The image is also cleaner because of the lower base ISO, which is now 125. Latest Fujifilm and also Viltrox lenses can indeed render more than 26 megapixels. It also captures a great amount of detail in the real world. If you like to zoom in a lot or do a lot of heavy cropping, you won't be disappointed. This is more than good enough for any kind of online publishing, including 8K and also for large prints. 40MP resolution on APS-C sensor is a real deal. The ISO performance is a little bit better than with the X-Trans4, but the difference is not that significant. As I've previously explained, that is a success because it means that there are no losses of signal-to-noise ratio caused by higher resolution. Also keep in mind that X-Trans5 has base ISO 125, which means that it is cleaner at both base ISO and high ISO. Those are contradicting goals that were achieved by the new technology, so thumbs up for that. Dynamic range has been improved, again by using base ISO 125. That means less noise and better signal-to-noise ratio at the base ISO and therefore even more freedom to play with sliders. Having said that, X-Trans4 already had a really good dynamic range. The colors are carried over from XH2 and largely from X-T4. Fujifilm colors have been among the most accurate for a while now, and that continues to be the case. Fujifilm has recently worked a lot on the white balance. Fujifilm generally prefers colder colors. I personally don't mind it, I like this kind of look. Of course, all of the film simulations that have been announced so far are available. I like to use them for JPEGs, and I think that it is a great way to get an interesting look out of the camera. Much like the XH2, X-T5 can shoot stacked 160MP images using pixel shift. It only works on a tripod and you need to combine the images in proprietary software. The amount of detail that you can capture this way is incredible, so if you have a tripod on you, it is definitely worth trying. Despite that the X-T5 is mainly a high-resolution camera, it still offers solid continuous shooting speed. You can get up to 20 frames per second, but that is with electronic shutter and 1.29 times crop. You can also get 13 frames per second with electronic shutter and no crop. With mechanical shutter, you can get 15 frames per second, which is a great value for a 40 megapixel sensor. Unlike the X-H2, X-T5 only has UHS-2 SD card slots, so the buffer capacity is limited to 19 uncompressed RAWs, which is a lot less than 104 on the X-H2. X-T5 is still a fairly capable fast action camera, but that buffer can be limiting. If you intend to shoot a lot of fast action, X-H2 or X-H2S will be a better choice for various reasons. The autofocus system seems to be very similar to the X-H2, which is very positive. In my standard testing, including focusing from minimum focus distance to infinity and the low light focusing, it performed pretty much the same. It handled all of my usual tests with no issues at all. Much like the X-H2, it can match the 15 frames per second speed of the mechanical shutter pretty well. Even when it misses some images, they are usually not completely out of focus and somewhat usable if necessary. I was always able to get enough sharp images to choose from in every run. This system also employs a number of smart features which are meant to identify and track the subject. Eye autofocus is also very accurate and reliable. It should also work with other subjects such as animals, birds, vehicles, and so on. Video autofocus seemed to work the same as with the X-H2. Speed and accuracy is not an issue in any situation. It also doesn't have issues with backlit subjects and the low light. Importantly, it won't make a pause in the middle of transition, which used to be an issue with older Fuji cameras. Focusing from close distance to infinity works well most of the time, but still not every time. There are some situations where it still doesn't work very well. Video autofocus is definitely improving, but now that the Panasonic has pretty much perfect autofocus in video, I would say that it is a time to completely fix the video autofocus with no compromises. My biggest complaint in the beginning of 2023 is still the lack of autofocus area modes in video, as I've explained in my previous videos. Other than that, I'm quite happy with the video autofocus. The in-body image stabilization system in the X-T5 is rated for 7 stops, although these values have to be taken with a grain of salt nowadays. I'm not sure whether it is the same IBIS unit as in the X-H2, but the performance is very similar. The performance of the IBIS in video is very solid. The stability of static shots is among the best cameras that I've tested so far. It actually works pretty well even at 75mm. Stability at focal lengths over, let's say, 35 or 50mm full frame equivalent seems to be a standout feature of this system. Fujifilm correctly describes the X-T5 as a photography-first camera, but it is also a capable video camera. There are some caveats though, especially in comparison to the X-H2. X-T5 can shoot 6.2K and 4K or 4K DCI HQ video up to 30 frames per second, but only with a significant 1.23 times crop. If you want no crop video, you have to use the non-HQ 4K or 4K DCI with lower downsampling rate. It can also shoot the non-HQ 4K 60p with 1.14 times crop. It can also shoot at any resolution and frame rate in 10-bit 422 all intra or long GOP up to 360 megabits per second. X-T5 video still looks very similar to the X-T4 video, which is not a bad thing to say. It can also shoot F-Log 2, which is one of the best log profiles out there. The results aren't quite as good as they would be with fully downsampled no-crop 4K HQ, but it still captures a great amount of dynamic range and offers a lot of flexibility in post-production. X-T5 is definitely good enough for occasional video use and for photographers who want to shoot some video on the side. In other words, the video is more than good enough for a primarily stills-oriented users. If you are more of a 50-50 hybrid user or even filmmaker, getting X-H2 instead is a pretty clear choice. That one offers no-crop 8K video, fully downsampled no-crop 4K HQ, internal ProRes, crazy bitrates up to 3500 megabits per second, and so on. The most distinctive feature of the X-T5 is that it uses dedicated dials for exposure settings. There is no PSAM dial on the X-T5, but on the other hand, it has a lot of additional dials and function buttons. Getting used to these controls takes some time, but once you do so, it is a lot of fun to use. In my experience and opinion, it is not the fastest way to operate the camera, but it is engaging and it is something different than with the vast majority of DSLMs. The front side of the X-T cameras is traditionally quite flat, which means that the grip is very minimalistic and the shutter button is further back in comparison to other DSLMs, so you will have to use different gripping technique. I definitely wouldn't describe the controls as a disadvantage. It is probably the main reason why people, including myself, buy X-T cameras. You just need to know what you are getting into. X-T5 also has a dedicated dry mode dial and separate settings for stills and video. These are the two settings that I miss on most DSLM cameras nowadays, so huge thumbs up for retaining them. If you don't like this style of controls, you can simply get the X-H2, which is not something that I could say when reviewing the X-T4. The user interface is identical to the X-H2 and basically all Fujifilm cameras that I've ever tested. It is pretty well organized and structured, so it is pretty easy to navigate. It still can't be controlled by a touchscreen. That is quite an odd thing to say in 2023. The Q menu is, in my opinion, still the best of all brands. That actually works with the touchscreen and the dials. It offers both big items and full screen background preview, which is what I prefer. If you set it up properly, you can change the settings very efficiently using the Q menu. X-T5 uses a 3-inch screen with 1.84 million dots, which is a slightly higher resolution than with the X-H2. This is an excellent panel with great resolution and brightness. It is one of the best panels available, so I am very happy with that. Even more importantly, the X-T5 goes back to a 3-way tilting mechanism. This is, in my opinion, the right choice for a camera such as this one. Camcorder style rotating screen was, in my opinion, out of the place on the X-T line, and it discouraged some of the long-term X-T line users from buying the X-T4. Tilting screen is much more practical if you are behind the camera for the reasons that I've already explained in the past, so this is a very welcome change. The viewfinder uses a well-known 3.69 million dot panel, but the magnification is higher at 0.80 times in comparison to 0.75 times in the X-T4. This EVF is completely fine at this price range. It is not as impressive as the 5.44 million dot EVF in the X-H2 though. X-T5 uses the same NPW235 battery with 2200 mAh capacity that we already know from the X-T4 and X-H2. Fujifilm claims a higher rated value of 580 shots in the normal mode, and I have indeed noticed lower consumption in my usual testing. I was also able to get about 125 minutes of 4K non-HQ video on a single charge, which is a great value. Lens selection is a complicated topic, so I will cover that in a separate video very soon. To sum up, I think that the X-T5 is a great refresh of Fujifilm's most popular line. The combination of a stylish, experienced-oriented body and very powerful X-Trans5 platform works very well. Even the price is much lower than I expected. X-T5 provides an excellent output and enjoyable experience at the same time, which is, in my opinion, the main purpose of the X-T line. Fujifilm's decision to bring back the proper screen mechanism and maybe sacrifice some video capabilities in order to make the X-T5 a little bit smaller seems to be correct. Autofocus and stabilization improvements are very welcome as well. There actually isn't that much that I can complain about, because the answer to most of my complaints would be just get the X-H2 or X-H2S instead. There are some things that can be improved though. Touch functionality in the main menu would be very welcome. Video autofocus is definitely not bad, but I think that it is a time to make it 100% reliable in all situations. The buffer capacity is below average, but there are understandable reasons why. Despite that, I think that the X-T5 is a great update for Fujifilm users who understand the purpose, the strengths and the limitations of the X-T line, and therefore I can highly recommend it. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.